All right. So Aguski's going to show us the work he's been doing to support protecting Openshift routes with Kuadrant. Go ahead, Aguski.
That's correct. So we recently merged one PR for applying Kuadrant API protection to an Openshift route. So the idea is we just annotate the route and API protections will take in place with extra configuration from Kuadrant APIs, of course. So I did some documentation about it. It's in the repo. First, it starts talking about installing Istio in OpenShift or installing Kuadrant. This is for now it's a given. I will start in the demo with the content of the user guide, which is here, right? So first, we'll be deploying our usual toy store application. I'm going to create an OpenShift new project, new namespace. Now I think we need to start changing terminology to the OpenShift new world, which is slightly different. 90% the same for our use case, but there are few things that are slightly different from working with Kubernetes, where Kubernetes. So creating a new project called my namespace. So I'm creating it. Now I need to I install or deploy Istio, bare Istio on OpenShift. It's not about the OpenShift service mesh, it's bare Istio. So in the documentation of Istio, they say that you need to add some customizations, custom configuration. So I'm just doing this. For my new namespace, I need to enable some permissions for the processes being run in the pods. So it's just adding some custom configuration, nothing really fancy. Also, the networking configuration that needs to be done. Again, this is all in the Istio documentation. So I'm just creating some configuration for my new namespace. And then I'm going to deploy our toy store, usual stuff. Okay. The toy store only has one container in the pod. It's creating. Let's finish to run. So one of the requirements for having Kuadrant API protection at the route level is that we inject a sidecar, a Istio sidecar, in our service, in the toy store service. So that's the next thing I'm going to do right now, it's injecting the sidecar. So it's very easy. It can be done in different ways. The approach I'm taking here is add some label in the pod. I am adding some label in the pod of the toy store deployment. I'm saying sidecar is to inject equal to true. That's all. This is nothing really complicated. And Istio does all the magic. I'm just adding one label. So if I do this, looking at the pods, you see that the Istio is injecting some second container with the Envoy in the Envoy proxy in the second container. So let's wait. It should take few seconds. Initializing, usually 30 seconds more or less. Here we go. So we have our toy store service with a second container with the Envoy proxy being injecting as a sidecar. So we have all the pieces in place. Let's create a route for that toy store. I'm going to first define one domain name. I'm going to define this. I need to use the domain of my OpenShift cluster. I cannot use anyone just for the purpose of accessing externally. I'm not opening any backdoor as we do in Kubernetes. This is, I mean, I'm accessing to Openshift as any other customers or API consumers would do. So the domain name I'm going to define will be Toy Store, and this is the subdomain I need to add, or top level domain I need to add for accessing the OpenShift cluster I'm using right now for this demo. So Toy Store domain will be that. Okay. Then I'm going to expose my service, creating a route. Okay. For that task, the OC CLI has a nice command for doing that very easy way, which is this: OC expose my service toy store with the given hostname. So I create the route. The route has been created. If I query the route, get the route, I see my route being created for the toy store service. I can check that I can access the service. So the toy store is being accessed externally using the route. So far, so good. No questions, nothing. I proceed. So let's start applying some protections to it. Let's start with the authentication or authorization. So for that, we are going to annotate the route first with a generic Kuadrant annotation, a label. In this case is a label. This tells our Kuadrant control plane to start watching this route for configuration annotations for authorization and rate limiting. So this is just to say our control plane start watching this route. Okay, so I'm going to label it. Done. Then next thing I'm going to add some authentication based on API key. So the Kuadrant API for the configuration is Authorinos API. So authconfig, this is the authconfig, very simple for my toy store domain. Okay, and I apply some API key based identity. So I'm going to create this. Okay, I'm going to create the API key that's as a secret in the shape of a secret. The API key will be key for demo. Okay, done. So what I need to tell the Kuadrant control plane is that I want this route to be authenticated. So that is done with an annotation in the route. I say annotate my route with this custom Kuadrant annotation saying that I want authentication. So right now, if I try the same request I did earlier, it says not authorized. If I add authorization header to my request with the key I define it in the secret, I can access the toy store service. The Kuadrant controller, I add some smart intelligence to the Kuadrant controller. So if you remove the annotation of protection, of authentication protection, I can access the service without any API key. Okay. So that's done for the authorization part. Let's work on the rate limiting part. So first thing for adding rate limiting is create the rate limit configuration using the Kuadrant API, which is the rate limit policy. I'm going to show it right now. I'm creating very basic configuration. This is a virtual host level rate limiting, so it will be applied to all the paths. It's basically generating three. There are three actions for three descriptor entries. One descriptor, three descriptor entries, generic key, request header from path, and remote address, and one rate limit counter, which will be 2 requests every 10 seconds for these conditions. Here, I'm not going to explain detail about conditions and variables, but just think about that. It will allow 2 requests every 10 seconds for all the traffic for this service. Think about that. So I created the rate limit policy. The control plane doesn't know that the toy store needs to be rate limited with this rate limit configuration. So next thing to do is to annotate the route with a reference to the rate limit policy we just created. This is the name of the rate limit policy we just created. Toy store. It's called Toy store for convenience. So if we do this, now the control plane should do all the wiring up. So all the traffic for this toy store through the route should be rate limited. So if it's 2 requests every 10 seconds. So 1 request, 2 requests, done. Limited. In 10 seconds, it should work again. Here we go. On already. That's all. That's the demo. For cleaning up resources, I'm going to just for completeness, remove the configuration, specific configuration, and remove the namespace. Done. Thank you very much.
It was a great demo. Thanks, Zabriskie.